Welcome to the channel where we explain things about the USA.
This is the place.
This is the place, and today I'm gonna ask about the museums of the USA. I want to know how many of them are there, if it's actually worth visit some of them, because not everybody goes to the other countries just for the museums.
True.
Is it worth it? That's the question. Is it worth it?
I can tell you all about it. So I think the most important question that you asked there is it worth it to visit the museums in the US? In my opinion, yes.
Okay.
In fact, in my opinion, definitely, but I'm a museum person.
Yeah. And I'm not. So let's see if you can actually
Convince
me that it's worth it, okay?
Okay.
Let's make it like a challenge.
All right.
Convince me that it's worth to visit the museum.
Okay. So, in my opinion, the museums in the US are a little bit less interesting than the ones in some European countries, especially in France and the UK.
So what could we expect in the USA museums?
Well, let's first talk about the big, famous, classy museums. And I should say that there are probably three main hotspots for museums. If you're interested in museums and you're going to the US, you want to go to New York, to Washington, D.C., and to several Californian cities that shouldn't be one place, but kind of California in general. Each of those areas have multiple world-class museums.
So it's like a big museums.
Huge museums. Actually, in New York, the Met... It's called the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Metropolitan Museum of New York.
Okay.
It's the fourth largest museum in the world, and it's mostly about art and history, but it's huge. So I've been there. Unfortunately, I just had 2 hours, but I think you could spend days there because in 2 hours I just kind of covered one section of the museum. So. All kinds of art from almost all periods of history, artifacts, lots of exhibitions of like traveling groups of artifacts. So if, for example, King Tutankhamun's tomb is going to the US, it will go to the Met. If a collection of like 500-year-old samurai armor is traveling the world and goes to the US, it will go to the Met.
So there's a big chance that while we are visiting the museum, there's going to be something extra.
Yeah, definitely. And there'll be something really special and world-class. So for you, maybe the artwork wouldn't get your interest so much, although there's some huge, amazing oil paintings there. But you could
I like it when it's more interactive, not just like a picture on the wall.
So the Met probably would not be the place for you.
Okay, good to know.
Because it's all very valuable old stuff. Okay. But also in New York, there is maybe one of the top 5 museums in the US, the Museum of Natural History.
Okay.
This one is a bit more interactive. And it's all about nature. And you can see a lot of different things there. Like they have a blue whale,
alive?
No, but a full-sized blue whale suspended in a giant room, and so you can like stand under it and really feel how big it is. But this is just like one corner of it.
Nice.
You can see, I think, hundreds of different species of animals, like either stuffed or recreated in their full size. And this one they try to cater to kids a lot more than the Met also, so there's lots of interactive things, of learning things, and this is really, really cool. So those are some of probably the 2 main museums in New York. Moving on from New York, although there's lots of other museums in New York that are amazing. But to look at something a little bit different, Washington, D.C., where I lived for 2 years, has the Smithsonian Museum system, which is 19 museums
Oh.
They're all called like a Smithsonian.
They're like in the one big area or around the town?
Most of them are in the center of the city. There are a few others that are a bit farther away, but most of them are actually walking distance.
Okay.
Those are also completely free.
Mm.
You don't pay anything to enter them because they are completely government funded. And some of them are some of the best museums in the country. So the most popular ones are the Museum of Air and Space,
Okay.
which is massive, and it's very open air. So you walk in and you see the full-sized spaceships and planes like suspended from the ceiling.
Nice. Yeah.
You can go inside a lot of them.
Inside the planes?
Yep, some of them you can go. You can get in. You can get in the driver's cockpit. There's lots of interactive exhibitions.
I like this one.
And if you're interested in flying or space exploration, that is you could spend all day there, learning about
and everything for free. Wow.
Completely for free. On the other side of the National Mall, it's a big park in the center of Washington D.C. called the National Mall. On the other side of the National Mall is the National Museum of Art, or the National Gallery of Art, rather, which is a beautiful, I would say, European-style art museum, especially with a lot of impressionists that I really like. Some original impressionists from Monet and Monet and like some beautiful stuff. Also free. The National Zoo, that's a little bit outside of the center, is completely free because it's also in the Smithsonian system. They have, I think now 2 or 3 giant pandas.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. When I was living there, actually a giant panda was born there, and it turned, I think, 2 when I was there, and so it had to go back to China.
Oh yeah, it's only for years.
His name was Bao Bao.
Okay.
So we all had to go and say goodbye to Bao Bao. But he was in the National Zoo.
Okay.
Let's see.
So you're not paying even like the donation if you want to?
No, there's no request for donation.
Okay, just enter freely.
They don't accept any money. Yeah.
Oh.
So that Washington D.C. is great for that.
Yeah.
The Museum
like
of American History is really popular also because you can see a lot of the original artifacts. I'm not sure if it's still the Museum of American History, but you can see the original Constitution.
Yeah.
You can a lot of things that you see in National Treasure Hunter.
Okay. You can see there.
A lot of like the original flag that inspired the national anthem. It's now like 250 years old, so that original flag is there, and it's huge. It's a couple dozen meters long.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's see. The one tip that I will say is that I also went to the National Museum of American Indians. So all about the Indian tribes
and we're
different
still
groups.
in Washington D.C.
This is still in Washington D.C. That one, it's in the most interesting building because it looks really unique and it's almost like modern art. The entire building. I was quite disappointed by the exhibitions, though. I didn't feel like I learned any. I really wanted to learn about American Indians because I always feel like I don't know enough. I don't think I really learned anything being there.
So you do not recommend this one?
I don't-
Maybe
I don't
only from the
recommend
outside.
Yeah, look at it on the outside. You can't miss it. But I didn't have a great experience there. So if you can only choose 2 or 3 museums in Washington, D.C., that one's not as exciting as it
Because it's
sounds.
not always about the money, but it's about the time, especially if you are visiting.
Definitely. There are then 2 museums that are for-profit museums in Washington, D.C. called the Newseum, which is all about journalism. So from the beginning of journalism, and it's like 5 floors high, and a lot of interactive things to learn about, like the effects of social media, to know how stories spread around the world. You can actually like interact with all these different displays, and a really, really touching exhibit about September 11th.
Oh,
So it's strange that it was in Washington, D.C., but it was a really emotional experience because it's a bit interactive, but it really puts you through the experience of being on the site when the towers were attacked. But this one the Newseum costs $25.
Okay.
And then there's the Spy Museum.
Spy? Sounds interesting.
Yes. This one
costs... like from real spies?
Yep. So it's...
Not like James Bond.
I would say the funny thing is the bottom floor, the last thing that you go through, it's all about James Bond. Okay. So you have several floors about the history of spies and talking about specific people who changed this event or used like the kind of equipment that they would use in the 1920s or 50s.
And is it only about American spies?
No, no. I would say you could describe it as a museum about the history of espionage.
Oh. Okay.
Also very interactive, lots of fun, especially for kids. I think there are places where you can like crawl around and use camouflage and try to like uncover clues, and it's
Do you
cool.
have a like shooting range there that you can try?
No, there's no shooting games. No, unfortunately.
I thought shooting range.
Shooting range. No. We might come to that a bit later though. Okay. All right. Well, moving on. Then, since I'm from California, and especially from the area around San Francisco, I wanted to mention that, well, in Los Angeles, there's two also world-class museums called the Getty, which is more like classical art, and the Broad, which is more modern, contemporary art. Okay. In San Francisco, this is kind of the honorable mention, that if you're in San Francisco, and especially if you have kids, I strongly recommend the Exploratorium.
And would you explore
everything? Now, I haven't been there in 20 years, but I have very fond memories as a kid going there. It's basically an entire museum to help kids learn to love science. So almost everything is interactive.
So do you love science now because you've been there as a kid?
I would say I'm more interested in it than I would be if I didn't have those experiences. Okay. I'm not a scientist. I don't have that kind of mind, but I wish I did.
It got your attention.
It got my interest, definitely. Okay. You can do lots of experiments. You can actually experience optical illusions. I mean, I don't know what it's like now. They're probably changing it all the time, but it's really fun and it's a great.
And this one is for free or not?
I don't think it's for free. I'm not sure how much it is, but I don't think that one is free. Yeah. So if you're in any of those places, I should also say that some other world-class museums. The Art Institute of Chicago is the 10th largest museum in the world. The Museum of Fine Arts in Boston is the 16th largest museum in the world. Both these are classical art. And then there's a National World War II museum in New Orleans that is supposed to be one of the best World War II museums in the Western Hemisphere. So if you're in any of those places, I would say those museums are worth spending half a day at just for the experience, especially the ones that aren't based just on art, because if you're from Europe especially, you have some of the best art museums in the world here in Europe. But for other things, and if you're not convinced yet, those are like the classic, the classic big museums. Okay. We also have a long tradition of kind of weird and unusual museums.
In what way?
Let me give you some examples. Okay. So, for example, I didn't memorize this. So, in Wisconsin, there is a National Mustard Museum.
Okay.
In Missouri, there is something called Layla's Hair Museum, where all of the art is made out of human hair.
Yeah, it's creepy.
It's creepy, yeah. Do you know about Roswell, New Mexico? Area 51?
UFO, yeah.
Well, if you decide to try to visit Area 51, and for some reason they don't let you in, instead you could go to Roswell's UFO and Research Center. UFO Museum and Research Center. Yep.
Okay.
Portland has an International Cryptozoology Museum, which has over 10,000 artifacts that are trying to prove the existence of mythological creatures. So, if you want to believe...
Yeah, there's enough proof there.
There are 10,000 pieces of proof. What more evidence do you need? In California, there's an International Banana Museum.
Wow. Is it a big one? You probably don't
They
know.
probably big ones and small ones.
I mean, is it like the museum really big? If it's just about banana.
I saw pictures actually. It's not small.
Okay.
It's not like one room or something. It is a whole building about. And Idaho has a potato museum. Of course.
Okay.
Sorry, Idaho, but of course you have a potato museum.
Okay.
Now,
Wow.
I have one
You still
more.
have more?
One
Okay.
more way of trying. So, do you think?
You definitely convinced me now.
Which
that
of
you love museums.
I do.
That's for sure.
I really like museums. I like learning things. I like seeing beautiful things. Yeah.
But I didn't know they are like the more interactive one, like with the espionage and with the plain ones. I like it that one. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think to seal the deal and maybe get you into some American museums one day, I wanted to tell you about in Texas, Frisco, Texas, they have the National Video Game Museum, which has different rooms that represent different stages of the video game industry. So you can go through the decades of video games, and
But that's probably interactive. You can probably play the games.
almost everything you can play, and you can play with other people, whether strangers or friends. They are also famous for a giant-sized version of Pong that apparently is like, you know, Pong,
Like,
like,
yeah,
like
I know,
the
but
first video
like-
game.
okay,
Apparently,
so-
it's the size of a wall, like a huge wall.
Okay.
There's also, finally, the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, Washington. The entire museum has exhibits that cover pop culture from the art of fantasy, horror cinema, and video games, including also science fiction literature and costumes from screen and stage. So,
What was the last one
from screen and stage. So like movie and stage productions of science fiction and fantasy stories. They have like original costumes and props and also video games there. They have instruments from famous bands and anything about pop culture.
So it seems like there's something for everybody, actually.
I think there is, honestly. I feel like it's always
I would
worth
definitely
checking out
choose.
museums.
Not only one, probably.
Really? Okay, if you had to choose two, which of these do you think you would actually go to?
I would maybe... Well, I choose three. The espionage one, the one with the planes, and the one with the nature.
You definitely should have come and visited me in DC. Like
All of them were in DC.
Those are all in DC. Yeah. Well, the best.
Well, you are not there.
The best natural museum one is in New York, but Washington D.C. also has one. That's pretty fun as well.
Yeah.
If you go to the U.S. and visit museums, now that I'm not there, I'm going to be really annoyed because I tried to get you to visit, and you said, I don't, not really interested. You just want to go to Asia. Fair enough. So I hope I was able to convince you that it's not just paintings and sculptures in museums. There are lots of cool things to do, and I think they're innovating museums all the time, and the U.S. is really good about that, also trying to make them interesting.
Okay. I think you have succeeded in the challenge. Congratulations.
Thank you. So if I've convinced you to check out some museums in the U.S., please let us know in the comments. Tell us which museums you would most like to visit, and let us know
Or
if you
some
have
recommendation, like for others, maybe.
Yep.
You've seen some pretty interesting museums yourself.
Yep. Leave us a comment. If you like this video, leave a like.
And please subscribe.
Please subscribe
Please
to our
do.
channel. That would really help us out. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye.